Good morning, everybody. The relationship between God and the Jewish people is compared to a marriage. And that's not just a nice parable or a nice word that's used. It's really a marriage. In other words, there's supposed to be a relationship there. And the relationship is really supposed to be the basis of what we're doing here. And not just any relationship, but a loving relationship. So when God gave the Torah on Mount Sinai, that event was considered to be the day of the marriage itself. So we got married. We had a chuppah, which was Har Sinai. We had a ketubah, which was the two luchos, tablets. And we started our marriage. We had a nice honeymoon for 40 years where we had miracles and all types of things happening. And then life started getting down to reality. We had to fight wars. We had to make a living for ourselves. We had to grow our own plants. We didn't have any man anymore, and so forth and so on. In any case, but God in the meantime, so you know what? In this relationship, I'm going to give you 3 different types of mitzvahs. I'm going to give you lots of mitzvahs. Lots of commandments, and those commandments are things that I really personally, God says, I want you to do. I need you to do. I'm commanding you to do because they're important to me, and that's part of your purpose in creation also in this relationship is to fulfill those commandments. But it's very telling that God gave these commandments in 3 different categories. And it helps us understand the nature of marriage itself. First of all, the first category is just those simple things that we would understand even without God giving them. In other words, most of the 10 commandments are things that we would know even before the 10 commandments were given. Don't kill, don't murder, don't steal, so forth and so on. The second category, those things that we wouldn't normally think of, but once God commands them and explains what the reason is, so then, all right, I can accept that. I understand that. For instance, Shabbos. God created the world in 7 days. He wants us to rest on the 7th day as a witness to the fact that he created the world in the first place. Great. Second of all, tefillin. God gave us tefillin. Who's going to think of putting black boxes on their body and wrapping them up with the straps? But once God explains that these have parchments in them, the parchments are all about the exodus from Egypt, and I want you to remember it and internalize it on a daily basis. All right, if that's important to you, then that's important to us, and we'll do it. And so forth and so on. All the holidays, so many things fall into the second category, which are called edus. Edus literally means witnesses. In other words, these are mitzvahs we do that give witness either to an event or something that happened or something that God found important to take note of, so forth and so on. But then we have this third category. And the third category is where we get into some real challenges for many people. The third category is what's called chukim. Chukim are those things that God doesn't give any explanation for whatsoever. And God says, okay, guys, this is it. You got to do this. I'm not giving an explanation. You can try to read into it as much as you want, but the bottom line is I need you to do this. This is important to me. And those are called the chukim. Now, chukim, it's not like there are hundreds of chukim. There may be 10, 20 chukim, but they are very, very hard for some people to keep. And I hear from many people out here in Long Island that, well, listen, I'll do what I understand. But things that I don't understand, how could God ask me to do something I just don't understand? Or if I don't understand, it really doesn't make sense. Or how can that be part of the relationship? How does that deepen my relationship with God if I don't understand what I'm doing at all? So, which are all reasonable reactions, but they're not reactions that really fall into the perspective of what a marriage or true marriage is all about. And here's where we get to the clincher. So when you date your wife or your husband, usually the beginning stages, everything's nice. He says the right things. She does the right things. They go the right places. They behave great. They really go the extra yard for each other. Everything makes sense. They're really, full steam ahead as far as trying to impress each other with how great this relationship can be. And either it works or it doesn't work. But if it works, then what do? We say, okay, this makes sense. Let's get married. And then we get to the wedding day, and the wedding day goes fine. Everybody's happy. Things are going real smooth. And 6 months down the road, what happens? He says something. She does something. He does something. She says something that just doesn't make sense. Like this is part of the package deal that I bought into. I mean, I don't get this. So you sit down, you have a powwow, you talk to your spouse, and say, okay, what was that all about? And he said, well, I got to tell you the truth. When I was a kid, this was something that was very important to me, or that's something that made a scar on me, or this is something that I always dreamed about, or this is something I have a real desire to accomplish. And, or I do have this little strange behavior, but it's just, just something that I can't control. It's been with me for years and years and years, whatever the explanation might be. But at least if we can try to explain it in a way that a spouse understands it, so then usually they can accept it and say, okay, that's part of the package deal. I get it. But then you get to the third category. A year later, year and a half, 2 years later, one of them does something that's literally from a foreign planet. It's like, how could this possibly be the person that I married? Like, this is so strange and so different. There's no possible explanation for this whatsoever. And you know what? They're right. And they sit down with their spouse and say, what was that all about? How'd you say that? How'd you do that? How'd you think that? And they say, I don't know. I really can't give you a good explanation for that. That's just part of me. And then you stop and you think and say, wow, this is the person that I married? What a shocker. What a surprise. This is part of the package deal that I got. Well, I don't know if what I should do about this. So what does that mean? You really come to the understanding that we can't necessarily define our spouses to be exactly who we want them to be, as many of us know and experience. In other words, once you're married to the whole person, even to those parts of the person that you really don't understand or have a hard time accepting, or really sometimes are just even turned off by. But you marry the whole person. You don't, let's say, if I would say, listen to my wife, I'm married to you except for taking out the garbage. Or that's not something I understand why I should take out the garbage. She'll look at me like, are you from Mars? What do you mean by that? In other words, you take on the whole package of what marriage involves and what it is a commitment to. And the same thing going back to our marriage with God. God says, you know what? There's a lot of things in this marriage. There are those things that you're going to understand, and those things that you're not going to understand, but I'll explain them to you and give you a reason for them. And then there are those things about me and our relationship that I'm just asking you to love me for who I am, and to accept that as a God, there are things that I know that are really beyond your intellect. And I can't really explain them to you because you're not going to understand them anyway. They're just way over your head. But they are an important part of our relationship. And those are the chukim. Those are the chukim which really are, in many cases, the challenge that we have in a marriage with God, as in a marriage with our spouse. But those are the things that really have a certain extra dimension, or add an extra dimension onto the marriage, which is very unique and very important. And I'll explain more of that tomorrow, because I figure tomorrow's Thursday and we're going to be snowed in anyway here in Suffolk County. So we'll make a little effort to do part 2 on mitzvahs and marriage. Have a great day. Enjoy the day while the sun's out, and stay warm.